full of life. Come on, Baptists.
All right, we're here. Thank you so much, you two. I have the pleasure of welcoming two great legends in San Diego. And I'm pleased to announce we have Mike Wofford and Holly Hofmann here. So welcome, guys.
Hey.
And thanks for doing this. Good to see you two.
Good to see you, Louis.
I'm used to seeing you with a guitar.
Well, I got one right here.
Okay.
So thanks so much for doing this. I'm so glad to talk to you guys. I always see you kind of around town or on gigs and coming to check you out, whether with Gilbert or at the jam sessions or wherever it is, or at the Westgate, which I'm glad that's back.
Yes.
But you know, I thought it'd be nice to sit down and just have a chat, pick your brain a little bit, maybe talk about music. But it doesn't also have to be about music. It could be about life or whatever. So I didn't want it to be too. I didn't want to ask you too many questions, so I just figured we could sit down and chat.
Okay.
But I will have to say, Mike, there's one question I do want to ask you. And I remember nerding out on Sarah Vaughn a lot, and I found this video where she's introducing, and I can't see you because it's kind of dark, and I can't really tell if it's you or not. But she says, "I want to introduce my piano player. It's Mike Wofford." And I remember just like thinking, like, "What is that, Mike?"
Yeah.
So I found this recording on YouTube again, and I just wanted to maybe we could start there. I mean, could you shed some light onto some of that?
Yeah, there are a few of those available from when I was with Sarah.
Mm.
You were talking about Sarah, right? Or Ella?
I was talking about Sarah.
Yeah, Sarah Vaughn. Yeah, Ella was later.
Well, yeah, perhaps you could talk about both. I mean, I would love to hear. I mean, anything you want to talk about.
Well, they were both. What can you say? They were both marvelous, iconic figures.
Right.
Jazz and pop world, primarily jazz, and both of them were just incredible giants. Wonderful to work for, and I was very fortunate. Sarah was she was a little younger than Ella, and they're both passed now. But she had come up after Ella. Ella started out as a young, I think still a teenager, singing with big bands.
Mm-hmm.
That's when big bands existed and had singers.
Right.
With them.
That was a different time, yeah.
Yeah, a different time altogether. And but she came up about the time. I mean, she knew Charlie Parker and Biz and all of the bebop era people. I mean, they were all contemporaries,
Mm-hmm.
So she had a certain approach to singing that was different from Ella, who came a little later, and she came up. Actually, that would have been even before Sarah. She came up with big bands, and she had a different approach to singing. Sarah was more of a bebopper in many ways as a vocalist. She and Ella was a little bit more geared into singing with big bands and that sort of thing. And later on, she was just usually worked with a trio when I was with her. But they were different people in their own right, giants, but each had a little different background, and they were coming from a little different place.
Do you two like listen to some of those old recordings still? Like because I guess for me, I find myself rediscovering certain songs, and I'm like, wow, I haven't heard this like I remember when I was learning, just you're constantly learning about music, and it's like to revisit a song. Sometimes it'll be imprinted in my mind of like when that was when I learned that song and where I was musically. And it's like, wow, to like revisit it. It's just sometimes I have moments where like, I think that's kind of why I found that video. It's just I was revisiting a song. I don't remember what it was, but I don't know. It's weird to think about how when you're learning stuff and you can revisit these tunes, like for me at least, it pinpoints like a certain moment where it's like, oh wow, I remember where I was when I was learning that song,
Oh, sure.
Well, we all learned from recordings a lot. And I remember my teacher, the great Frank West, said, you better be learning all the tunes correctly.
Yeah.
And so the only way you can do that is to listen to recordings and figure out, well, especially vocal recordings, even for an instrumentalist, because the correct melody is based on the lyrics.
Yeah.
And I think on my first recording, I recorded one standard melody, just a little bit wrong. I mean, I took liberty with it, so hopefully it passed. But because I was listening to somebody play it that played it wrong, Miles played things
Right.
that weren't on the page. But of course, he was Miles, and he could do that. But it depends on who you learn from. I mean, so listening to a lot of recordings, like you were saying, when you rediscover these tunes, depends on who it is and whether you can relate to the lyric.
Yeah. I try when I'm learning, especially like you're saying with these vocal tunes and you're trying to learn the melody or the head and play it, especially if it's a standard, and everyone knows it. It's like I try and, I mean, if I'm really going to learn a song, I end up going through at least 3 different versions, which hopefully are in 3 different keys. And by the end of it, you're like, okay, well, this is what they do on that. That's what Wes plays. Or this is that's kind of what Ella's band's doing. Like that chord sub is okay. Or like, Mike, I found this recording when we were in New York. We were at some like little, I remember it was like, it went downstairs and it was like a bookshop, like, but it had CDs there. And I bought this Sarah Vaughn record for like $2. It was like this pink CD, and it was live in Japan. And there's a moment on there where, I listened to the whole record, and it's great, of course. As Magnuson says, everything that, he always talked about when he played with her. There was a moment where we were talking about, he's like, she always sounded great, but on certain nights, she just sounded fantastic. And it's like on this concert, there's a moment where they do this ballad, I think is Nearest to You. And I was like, man, this piano player is just reading her mind. And it ends up being, and then I realized, I was like, wait a second, I look on the CD and it's her playing piano, of course. And it's just amazing. She does like she ends up finding like these chromatic 2/5s, and just the way, but like she gets there so natural. You can tell it's just like very much in the moment, and she's kind of laughing as she does it. And it's just so interesting. But like in those moments, I think of like all these, trying to like find all these recordings, listening to how they play them, these different things they do.
Sarah was a good pianist. She could accompany herself very well.
Yeah. I mean,
so was Carmen McRae.
Say again.
So was Carmen McRae, a good pianist.
Okay, yeah. I mean,
that's really rare for vocalists.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think I remember trying to learn some more about Sarah. I think she grew up doing like as an organ player. She played in, I think is what, anyways. But maybe you I don't know. I find it interesting because once I find like a really good version of a tune that I like, sometimes, I don't know. I feel like, especially piano players, you guys are so good at this. Like there's always things that you guys do, whether they're chord subs and how you get places, that are just kind of make the song. Like for me, it's just, that's what makes that song kind of unique. Like, oh, we can go here or do this, or, I mean, maybe you could speak to some ideas of that, of like, just because I'm curious to kind of pick your brain, both of you really, I mean, because like I remember Holly, we did a gig the other day at the Westgate, and you did this cadenza that was just like amazing, and I was just like, what is she thinking right there? Like, so like I don't know if you guys could maybe just speak to like some tunes that you like, some standards that are very common, and like some I don't know, just in the vein of kind of what you were talking about, Holly, of like learning tunes correctly and how how to do that.
Well, Mike is the expert, though, in having played with him for years. Having played with him for 10 years when we were just in a band, we weren't, well, with Bob Magnuson, actually.
Okay, yeah.
We weren't together then. But, piano players and guitar players need to know how to accompany. And piano players have that thing that you mentioned where they can add certain fills and certain places and guide the soloists, be it flute or voice or whatever, into a really good area. And that, a lot of us say that Mike always makes people sound better than they are, but which is true in my case. But also that filling and the accompanying is a huge part of how good that person sounds. So I know Sarah could accompany herself, but also I've heard Mike accompanying her, and he accompanied her totally different than he did Ella, because Ella wanted chordal big band ideas behind her, and Sarah wanted jazz.
Yeah.
She wanted.
That was saying that came from a different time.
Right. Okay. That goes back to what you're saying. Yeah.
Ella was a few years older than Sarah, so she came up with a different crowd.
Well, you piano players and bass players are the key in a lot of, in my recordings, for instance, reviewers that reviewed recordings of mine with Mike and Bob Magnuson and Sherman Ferguson that said some of the solos from the piano and bass were some of the best recorded versions of those tunes. And they were, But Beautiful was one that Leonard Feather, the famous jazz writer, wrote about Mike's solo on But Beautiful, because it just made the tune. And if you're going to play standards that have been played by a bunch of artists, you need to do something with it that speaks to who you are as a player.
Yeah, I feel like the uniqueness is for me, I feel like it's just, for some reason, especially with jazz, it's like that we want to hear who you are, like you just be honest of like you talking. And I think that's what I've always tried to do. Because at first it's hard to like, you're like, okay, well, I'm playing all these scales, I'm doing all these things, you're trying to play all these, do what you're supposed to do, when you hear these guys improvise, and then they, you hear about how to do it, and this is what they talk about. And it's like, but once you get all those things down, then it's just like, you just gotta just have fun and be you. But it's, sometimes it's hard. And we all struggle with that, I think, sometimes, probably me more so than you guys.
No, we all struggle with it, believe me.
It's almost more about what you don't play, what you maybe can play. That isn't maybe appropriate at that moment, or too busy, or not busy enough. I mean, there are a lot of fine degrees as far as backing people from keyboard, or it's true for a guitarist, obviously.
So how has it been for you two throughout this COVID stuff? I know that you kind of started playing some more, but obviously now, but I don't know, how has it been, like, just, I haven't really had a podcast. Well, I had one with Kamal, but I guess we didn't really talk about it at all. It just kind of made me think about, you guys are in your studio and we had to do this via Zoom just because it was easier and safer. And
I'd like to hear Kamal's. He's one of my favorite players.
Oh yeah, he's great, man. San Diego has some great gems here.
Absolutely. And many who left San Diego.
Yeah, that's true. And I didn't even realize that Harold Land's from here.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of cool. It's a cool little history unique to its own.
Great drummer John Guerin, who worked with everybody in the business practically. And eventually, when he left San Diego, he was just a young guy when he left. We used to work together. We met each other in high school, actually. And John Guerin is not a household name like, some major well-known drummers, but everybody in the business knows who he was. And I just discovered recently he actually recorded with Thelonious Monk.
Oh, wow.
At one point, I didn't even know about that. So, and there was a great trumpet player who unfortunately died very young, but he's a major part of San Diego jazz history. Don Sleet was his name, and he was just a monster player when he was about 18 when I first heard him, I think. So San Diego has a lot to be proud of. Daniel Jackson, who's
Of course.
Players and people, and didn't become a huge name because he didn't really push that. He pretty much stayed in San Diego and didn't become a major figure, but Daniel was really exceptional. So there have been a bunch of people from San Diego over the years.
You know what? I wish I would have been able to speak with Daniel more. I didn't really. I don't know. I guess I just didn't really. Our paths didn't cross. I mean, I knew who he was. I guess I was just kind of still learning, and I don't know. I never really got to sit down and chat with him too much. But
Daniel didn't have a lot to say anyway.
Yeah,
He was one of the quietest guys I ever spoke with.
Okay. I remember seeing him at Croce's a few times.
Yeah.
But yeah, as I got older, I kind of started to see his place in San Diego, and I kind of always regretted not getting to talk to him as much. Him and Mundell Lowe.
Yeah,
Man.
Holly knew him very well.
Yeah.
You may or may not have heard a recording of mine that Mundell was on called Dual Personality.
Oh.
And he wrote an arrangement for the two of us. It was all duos. And Mike was on it, and Ron Satterfield. And Mundell wrote an arrangement, a couple of arrangements for me, and we recorded one of his originals called Nairobi Getaway. Anyway, if you don't have it, I'll send it to you. But
I'm gonna check it out, definitely.
He's just it was. My dad was a jazz guitarist, so for
cool.
me, in the same kind of way, he had a big Epiphone, really mellow sounding guitar, and he and my dad had a similar approach. So playing with Mundell was a real treat. And along those same lines, you were saying during COVID, we dug out some of these recordings. Mm-hmm. We did, what I like to call deep listening. Like, instead of having something on in the background when you're doing dishes or whatever, mm-hmm. just sitting there and listening to some of these recordings. And Mike and I have never been one to, listen to our own recordings, because we often hear what we wish we hadn't played right at that moment. But we did pull out a lot of our recordings, and you hear different things, and you hear where you were at that time in your life, mm-hmm. and you can compare it to how you're playing now. And so that's something we did during COVID while we were, especially during the quarantine.
So what you're saying is this is a lifelong struggle that I'm just gonna have to get used to.
Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah, sometimes I tell people that, I'm like, look, man, I think it's just part of it. You're just gonna have to. You're on the path, and you're just walking until it stops. So.
And you change as you progress.
Right. Yeah, that's for sure.
And when I listen to my first recording and something recent, I think, what were you playing then? What was that? It's just you just change and you learn. I mean, I'm still trying to learn from my heroes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. What do you guys have any new plans coming up? Anything exciting? Anything you're working on?
Pretty much in quarantine.
Okay.
Well, right now, I mean, you're
Yeah.
picking a day that you
Yeah.
just found out, Westgate is going to not be for a while. It's just, well, we haven't been on the road either the last year, year and a half.
Yeah. Okay.
A couple of out of town things where we could fly direct,
Mm-hmm.
but it's really during this time, that you can't make plans.
Mm-hmm.
Every gig that I had booked for 21 or for 20 that got pushed off to 21 didn't happen on the road
Mm-hmm.
because it just was too worrisome for promoters and venues.
Right.
And it's the same in New York, a major.
Yeah, I just heard from Gilbert this
Area
morning
like
that Village Vanguard closed.
Ah, man, really?
Well, having worked at the Village Vanguard, let me tell you, there's not a breath of air down there. It's a basement. Have you been there?
Yeah, I've been there. Yeah.
I mean, it's there is no air conditioning. There are no windows there.
It's pretty much unchanged, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I remember walking down those steps and I was like, wow, who has walked down these steps?
Oh yeah.
Like, it's crazy. That's the only thing I thought of as I was like, wow. Like, yeah. I don't know. That's incredible.
Oh,
Say again?
You don't want to make a misstep on those stairs.
Oh, yeah.
those gnarly stairs.
Yeah, that
The stairs that go down way steep.
Yeah, that's true. Those would be.
I remember walking in the first time on the first gig there, and I had the same feeling you did. Like, who has walked down these stairs? Oh my God, I got so nervous on opening night. So nervous.
Pretty much.
Yeah, because your mind kind of goes to that. Like, wait a second. If this is how I'm
This
getting
is historic.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, yeah, that's cool. That's a cool. Yeah, I remember the first time I went there. It's very cool. Well, I hope you guys get back to it hopefully soon. It was nice to be able to come and hear you play at Westgate. And
I haven't had a gig. Well, Mike either. We haven't had a gig at home for years, just because it's, we're in and out a lot.
Yeah.
Steady, So it's been kind of fun to be at the Westgate until it got so cold that I couldn't keep the flutes warm and in tune. And you guitar players have the same problems in the cold staying in tune.
Yeah. Yeah, it goes out of tune, but it's just, and especially I'm like anyone playing piano or anything, it's just hard to play. Once your hands
fingers get cold. And
yeah, it's just like, I feel like I'm just like, you're in one of those bad dreams where you can't walk fast. And you're just like,
and the flute on the chin feels like an ice cube.
Right. Yeah, I can imagine.
Literally. I mean, like an ice cube.
Yeah.
So it's just, my mouth is always reaching for the right embouchure.
Right.
But they're very supportive of the jazz policy at the Westgate. I mean, they really are, but COVID has just everything.
Well, playing in hotels also, when you don't know who is staying in the hotel, and they're not required in hotels to show their vaccination rate or card. So, you don't know who's walking into your gig.
Yeah, that's true.
Especially in that little plaza bar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well,
we never thought we'd see this ever in our lifetime. I mean,
yeah, I was definitely out of left field. That was so strange. Yeah, I remember when it first came, I was like, wait, what? I remember it was at State, and Carl was like, yeah, I think they're going to shut down the school. I was like, no way, they can't do that.
Yeah.
And teaching on Zoom has been really difficult because I can't see I can't hear nuance well enough, and I can't see embouchure well enough, and it just seems kind of silly. But
yeah, I've been having some luck doing it. I just It is definitely hard. It doesn't really work well, but I did make my students just play with a metronome, which thought was the only solution, just because of you can't play with each other, or
Oh,
just no sense of. So I mean that ended up helping. It seemed like it over time. Their time did get better, but besides that, that was the only benefit. Everything else is just so much harder to communicate through it.
Yeah, I didn't think of it, having them play with a metronome. That's not a bad idea.
Yeah, I just made them on their end. Whatever mic they're using, if it comes through the same thing, it's usually on, and it's so you have a reference point of like, oh wait, no, you're not, you messed up the form or whatever. I mean, there's a reference point, and you can hear their feel, and that seemed to help. It was a little easier. Are you guys from San Diego initially? How'd you guys end up here?
I grew up here. I was born in Texas almost my whole life. I lived in LA. I moved to LA in the early 1960s and lived there for about 14 or 15 years, and then came back to San Diego, and I've stayed ever since.
And
So, did
did you start playing music real young? Like, was your parents musicians like Holly or?
no, not really. My mother was a singer. She not a professional singer, but she was good, and she used to do some singing with USO and different groups like that. This is back a long time ago. But other than that, there was really no one in my family. But she encouraged me to start piano lessons at one point, and I was probably only about 7 by that time. And so I had a little bit of classical training in the beginning, but very little over the years. I'm pretty much self-taught. I had a wonderful guy, a teacher at the old Thurles Music Company. You won't even remember that now, but it was right on Broadway downtown.
Oh, okay.
And a music store, and they had teachers had teaching areas that they could have students too. And he was wonderful. He was a Teddy Wilson fan. I don't know if you know that name or not. That's kind of yesteryear now, but one of the great pianists ever, Lester. He was incredible. But anyway, so my teacher was named Bill Franks, and he was a pretty good player himself, and he was a real fan of Teddy Wilson. So. And he was the one who he wasn't a strict disciplinarian type of teacher. He would kind of bring up certain things that I might want to think about and talk about. It's very casual, really. But he was the one that I think encouraged me to try being more experimental with chords and finding different voicings at the piano for chords. And
do you remember how he kind of showed you, like what in what ways would you find different voicings? Like, was it I don't know, I'm just curious as a chordal player, like how do you remember?
Well, I don't remember specifics too much. He would assign me a pop song every week. I think I went every week pretty much for several years.
Oh, cool.
Once a week. And he would write out pop songs for me, the chord changes, and so I learned a lot of pop music of that period. I mean, we're talking about 1940s and 50s.
Well, what we call standards now.
Standards,
Right.
standards.
Okay, I see.
And he used to jot them out for me and teach me, and he encouraged me to try things harmonically, try different things, and not just the standard voicings for kind of your basic.
How do you change your voice? I mean,
well, when you start adding flat nines and raised, what have you, then
when you start exploring more, yeah, he just enabled you to, that's great.
And he was very encouraging. If I surprised him one week with some kind of crazy off the wall stuff, rather than be critical like a lot of teachers could be, he would say, "Hey, I like that. What did you do there?"
Mhm. Yeah, that's cool.
Very encouraging, and I've always given him all. If I had any real help from a teacher, it would have been Bill Franks. He was,
Basically, Louis, he's self-taught.
yeah.
That's the
That's
amazing.
great. Well, that's great. I mean, so how, because honestly, I have this whole like theory and pedagogy around that of like, I have kind of strict ideas in my head now of how I approach teaching, just because I don't know. I think sometimes, I think it's great that there's like jazz school and you can go and like learn it in universities, which is kind of incredible. But at the same time, it's like sometimes the magic gets lost. You know what I mean? And it's just like they don't realize that, like, guys, they didn't learn it like this. Like, what are you doing? Like, you know what I mean? Like, so
That's well put. Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, but while like I learned a lot from doing that stuff, and people can and do learn a lot, and kids nowadays are learning a lot online, and that's partially why we're doing this, because I kind of embraced it, and I think it's incredible. So I'm trying to offer like a more, I don't know, what I feel is like the correct way of approaching it. It's just what has helped me try and do it. So it's like it's interesting to hear kind of how you're saying for both of you, really, and like how you guys approach it. And I mean, maybe like Mike, when after you learned like that with him, what was his name?
Bill Franks was
Bill Franks. Well, thanks, Bill. Um,
the,
after learning with him, how did you learn more on your own? And like, I'm sure it was through playing and playing with people and being on the bandstand, but I don't know, maybe you could shed some light into how you guys kind of approached it and learned as time went on.
it's hard to go back and pinpoint specific. Well, first of all, we had a lot of jazz records when I was a kid at home.
Okay.
Uh, Art, and I used to actually. I remember listening to Art Tatum on the radio.
Oh,
Yeah.
It was a radio show
yes.
in the morning. It was
I know.
called Piano Playhouse, and Art would mostly it was classical pianists, Rubinstein and people of that nature. But every now and then, Art would be on as a feature,
Wow.
and it just blew my mind. I couldn't even believe it. So I became a real Art Tatum fan very early on, and then Teddy Wilson, of course, as I was earlier.
Yeah.
Those are the really, who else was a really great piano player? It was Nat Cole.
Yeah, that's true.
Nat Cole was.
It's so true.
Yeah.
Mike, tell them the story about when I think it was a Bud Powell record. You were listening with Jim Plank and all your buddies, and you got this record.
He had the phonograph, I think.
He had the record player, right?
The record.
You were listening with your buddies, and I think it was Bud Powell, and you got this record, and it just blew you all, Johnny Guerin, and you guys, and it just blew you all away, and it changed you.
Well,
You said it changed your life.
Do you remember what record that was?
Well, it was I think probably cut on it was Poco Loco.
Poco Loco?
Kind of a
Un Poco Loco. Yeah.
Okay.
It's a great tune.
Yeah. And that I think that's what you were probably referring to. Yeah. Bud Powell was a major player.
But the boys hadn't heard anything like it, and they were just.
Well, yeah, we were awesome. Gary LeFevre was another part of that group. I don't know if you know his name.
Yeah. Yeah.
He was a really a major tenor player.
Mm-hmm.
I've come to appreciate in later life even how good he was more than I probably did at the time, because we were just kids coming up. But he belongs in the pantheon, the San Diego Jazz pantheon, along with Don Sleet and John Garrett and some of the other people I've mentioned. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, some of those, some of those Art Tatum. I remember when I first found Art Tatum, I did the same thing. I was just like, "What is this?" I think that's what everyone does.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, I can imagine, especially as a piano player, hearing that. It's like,
It's mind-boggling, and it still is to this day.
I mean, it is. It's timeless. It's like, I mean, it really is. It's like you hear it, and I still learn stuff. I mean, you can learn stuff from it every time you listen to it.
Oh, absolutely.
Like I remember, honestly, the one thing I learned from Art Tatum is he's the one who showed me that you can just play diminished one over the one chord.
Oh,
I remember hearing him, dude. I'm like, this guy's just playing. Oh my god, it does sound good. I was just like, well, yeah, of course. Like, and then I realized, like, oh, because the melody note was like I think it was a major 7, and so that's how he ended it, and it was just like diminished one, and then of course the voice leads up perfect. It was just great. I was just like, oh,
well, he's the really, I would say, the father of modern jazz piano.
mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree.
The great Los Angeles pianist Bill Cunliffe, with whom I worked for many years, was bound and determined that he was going to take, what was it, Willow Week for Me that he played?
Something, yeah.
That he played off. I mean, Bill is a classical and jazz, and he can play the Rachmaninoff 3 with an orchestra. I mean, that's how good he is.
Right.
He tried we were on tour, I think it was in Europe, and every piano he got to play, he was working on trying to play Willow Weep for Me by Art Tatum. And Bill had more technique than pretty much anybody I'd played with because of all the classical training. He couldn't get it. I mean, He just couldn't get it. He just said it's not possible. It's not physically possible to do that. So, Art Tatum, what can you say?
Yeah, that's great. I mean,
anybody could do it. Bill could have, but no.
Yeah, and you had mentioned say again.
I'll share a brief story. Oh, it was Art Tatum. The story goes, guys that were there told me this years ago. Oscar had just come to New York. He was a young guy. He was born in Canada and came.
Oh, I didn't know that. Wow.
He was Canadian, but he moved he came down to New York to live. And when he was, I guess, a teenager. Anyway, he already was phenomenal, chops, incredible piano technique. And there was a kind of a jam session going on. And piano players were taking turn playing solo piano for each other.
Oh.
And Oscar, at one point, did his number, and he just tore it up. The people were screaming; they couldn't believe it. Then Art Tatum followed him, and Art came up. You won't know this title of this song because it's from way back. But Art came up after Oscar had blown the roof off, and sat at the piano and played "Little Man, You've Had a Busy Day."
Okay.
It's a great old tune.
Yeah. He didn't say anything. He just played "Little Man, You've Had a Busy Day."
That's funny.
Isn't that a great story?
Yeah, that's great. It's totally what I would think that he would have been like.
Oh yeah, he was.
There was one more story.
Please lay him on me.
Ray Brown told me on the bus in Europe about when he and Hank Jones were sharing a room at the 92nd Street Y in New York as really young guys. And they went to hear Art Tatum in just a down and dirty club that he didn't remember what it was. And there was an upright piano and part of the keys were stuck down because it just was a mess. Mm-hmm. And they saw, and Ray and Hank were sitting in the front row to hear Art play it. And Art sat down and felt all the keys all the way up and down the piano for about 30 seconds to a minute and memorized in his mind what was playable and played unbelievably well. I mean, just tore it up and never hit any of the notes that were stuck down.
Wow.
And Ray, well, Hank especially, but Hank Jones especially, but Ray said they were so stunned they couldn't speak, they couldn't get up they were just awestruck.
That's a great.
That's cool.
And, Ray had so many of them, but, another tip of the hat to Art Tatum, just amazing. I mean, almost not, like Bill Cunliffe said, it's almost not possible what he did.
Right.
Art was blind, of course.
Right.
He apparently had a little bit of vision in one eye, just a little bit. And, I remember one of the other musicians of his era telling me that he could play cards if there was a card game going on. He could play cards, and he could hold the cards up to his one of his eyes was better than the other, and he could hold a card up and read it enough to play cards with the guys, So he wasn't completely blind, but he was.
For all intents and purposes, probably.
Yeah, I get what you're saying though, but he could interact and he could almost travel in between both worlds in that sense of like.
It's amazing when you hear his playing, you realize this is a man who can't see.
Yeah, I mean, he's just so intertwined in that audio.
I'm glad to know that you're an Art Tatum fan. I'm kind of surprised that I don't think most guys of your age group have
Oh, really?
that much about him.
Oh man, I went down an Art Tatum rabbit hole for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good for you.
Yeah, I mean that stuff's and you know what's incredible is, I mean I say this about all of the videos I find, especially in the jazz era. I mean you can find these recordings on YouTube and stuff, and I don't know who's taking these recordings and who's doing the video, but it's incredible. Like you see them playing, and it's like, some of them are at like these. I think one of them's like I think it's like a legit concert, and there's like cameras, and so it's like they knew what they were doing. But some of these recordings that you hear on just audio wise, it's like you can tell they're in just some club, and it's just in the back, or I don't know who the guy is that's there recording all this stuff. But some of the technology wise, the timing was just, thank God, the timing was perfect, because I mean, all that stuff would have been lost to just history. You wouldn't have heard any of it.
Those guys, there are guys that can take stuff off 78 records.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, even just the timing. It always trips me out. I think I was talking about this with someone. It may have been on one of the earlier podcasts, but I remember it's crazy how the timing of like the technology and I guess the jazz era. I mean, it kind of encompasses all of that stuff, but it's incredible because, I mean, some of that stuff. It was happening just as jazz was, and the discoveries of like audio technology. It's crazy, and I'm so glad it happened like that.
And it's so to your credit that you've listened to all these guys, because it will come out in your playing. I mean, you learn by osmosis. I've seen this with students so many times.
Mm-hmm.
And who you listen to does come out. And one of the things that Mike and I both noticed, because we taught UCSD jazz camp for, I think it was about 15 years, just ended a couple of years ago.
Oh, they stopped it?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Dan Atkinson was, of course.
Oh, of course.
Rating it. And we taught every summer, and the young pianists were not listening to any of these people. They were listening to Brad Meldau. I mean, who's great. And
of course, yeah.
And if they went back at all in time, they only went back to the McCoy years.
Right.
Where they kept wanting to sound like that.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And who doesn't?
Yeah, of course. I mean, yeah. Yeah, I get what you mean. I mean, I guess it's kind of how deep do you want to go? I mean, for me, it's just like, I kind of, and I'm still learning every day. I feel like I don't know as much as someone like, I don't know, like Joshua isn't, that guy knows, I swear that guy knows everything, because someone like that is just way deeper down the rabbit hole than I could ever get.
But we had Joshua as a student at camp,
Oh, okay.
and he was into it.
He was a flutist.
Well, he played the first
Oh,
year.
I forgot. Yeah, he does. Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
The first year he played flute and piano, and by the second year he played piano, and then he decided it was piano. But the thing was too, he listened to, before he started getting more progressive, he listened to all those guys. I remember him coming to neurosciences concerts for the Athenaeum, where Mike was playing trio with Peter Washington and Victor Lewis, and Joshua was sitting behind the piano in about the fifth row, and I don't think he ever moved through the whole thing, and he was, except his fingers were watching Mike and moving, and he was just sitting, he was just glued. And so his listening in that era of these piano players in Mike's era and beyond it's totally made him who he is, because when I hear Joshua, I hear a lot of progressive music, but I also hear that he still has one leg in traditional piano.
Yeah, absolutely.
And one leg in modern, and one enhances the other. He's an amazing guy.
Yeah, honestly, Joshua is like, I think he's so incredible. Like, I like literally every time I watch that guy play, he just blows my mind. Like, it's insane. I'm just like, and I feel like people don't even know. I'm just like,
he's finding his voice now. I mean, for years he was copying, and that's what you have to do. I mean, you should sit down and just try to make yourself sound like Wes, and then try to make yourself sound like Mundell, and that's getting all our heroes. That's how we find the voice. Took him years to find that voice.
Yeah, I mean, that's the hard part. I mean, you're right. That's the hardest part, I guess. So I mean, man. So how did you guys? I'm curious. How did you guys approach teaching jazz when you were at like UCSD or teaching the camp and stuff, or just in general? Like, how would you guys do it? You would. I mean, I'm sure you would obviously, listen to this tune and, all right, we're going to do this. Check this recording out, or. Yeah. But I mean, I don't know, maybe we could dig in a little deeper. I'm just curious as a teacher, kind of like how, if I was to like help some students, okay, this is how I do it. And I just do what I would do, but I'm just curious how you guys do it.
Holly's more of a teacher than I.
Okay.
Mike doesn't teach because he thinks because he's self-taught, he doesn't have a method.
See, that just makes me want to learn from you even more.
But Holly's a marvelous teacher.
But in camp, though, there's a set. I mean, we each have, on Monday morning, we get our ensemble for the week, and we all lead an ensemble, and they have to do a performance on Friday night. And starting from scratch with kids with, disparate backgrounds and, a lot of different levels of, musical ability. I mean, they try to put like players together, but it's tough at that age. So that's one of the big challenges, is trying to pull a performance together where all the parents and other instructors and everything are listening. So we had ensembles, so that's a different thing. But teaching individually, I think, is what you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, just I guess I'm just curious of, how you kind of approach. I guess my question is this, is that I've noticed that everyone has their own idea of these tunes and how they think of harmony and melody and rhythm, everything. Everyone has their own relationship with it. So I don't know, mine's unique to me. So it's just, as I've gotten older and I've learned from other people, usually the most I've learned is from people that like just kind of just I've played with and just they indirectly show me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you can learn a lot playing with people, that's for sure. I learned more from touring with Ray Brown's trio than I've ever learned
Right.
from any flute teacher.
Okay. And I guess, and do you think it's because, I mean, because at a certain point, it's like, as my ear just gets better and better, it's just like, I just can hear what you're doing. So if I hear you play and it's like, oh, wow, oh, wow, they're doing this. Or, wow, oh, wow. Okay. I never really thought of that. Or, oh, wow, they went to this instead of that. Oh, okay. Because the melody. Yeah, I see. Okay. Wow. Okay. You know what I mean? Like that's, I guess, I don't know that I learned the most from those moments, really.
I think we all did.
Okay.
For teaching flute players, it's a little different for guitar players because you guys are lucky you can see what you're doing.
Right.
For a flute player, obviously we can't see visually what's happening, but for them, I make them learn a melody. I mean, really learn a melody. And then when I say, do you really know it? And they say, yeah. I say, okay, I'll play it in another key by ear. And then they find out whether they really know it or not. And then after they really know it, we start doing how jazz was created in the early years, which is embellishing the melody. So that all the right melody notes are there and they become part of your vernacular for improvisation. And then after we're embellishing the melody well, then we go into improvising with that, not looking, but improvising with that tune in the back of your mind. And then we use the chords as a backup for what we're missing. Like if you're playing a standard, there's always, Frank West used to tell me that every pro in every standard misses probably one change or two changes per tune because they didn't learn it right. And melodies play wrong, yeah, but so then instead of playing by chord change, you're learning by ear and supplementing your knowledge with the chord after you've learned it by ear. And that's what I did with the kids at camp. And I think it makes a better player because if you're learning by math, which is chords, if you're learning just by chords and which scale goes with which chords and stuff, that's how you sound.
Yeah, I would agree with you.
So I can tell a Berkeley School of Music saxophone player in 8 bars because they're mired totally in which scale goes with which chord.
Yeah, I get you. And that's not to say that those scales aren't important and that it's not happening.
No, not at all.
It's just your approach. Yeah.
If you don't train your ears, you don't become.
Yeah, I 100% agree.
So using the chords as a backup instead of a place to start. The famous bassist John Clayton doesn't have any music in his studio with bass players. They have to learn everything by ear.
Yeah, I've kind of been implementing that a little bit. I kind of been doing a hybrid because sometimes you can't get away with just doing.
Well, and again, you can see the chord, so it helps with your visual.
Yeah, definitely.
Having that visual component.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Did you notice though, after we segued into stuff other than music, we got right back into music?
Oh, I know. That's funny. That's true. I didn't even realize that till right now.
I remember in your thing with Bob, you were talking about surfing. Bob's a surfer.
Oh, Bob's a surfer. Yeah.
Like Peter's a surfer.
Yeah, I've seen both of them at the beach on accident.
Oh.
I saw Bob one time walking his dogs. I was surfing with Ben Waneker, the bass player.
Oh yeah.
And we were surfing and we were getting out, and there's Bob Maxson just walking down the street in Point Level with his dogs. I was like, no way, that's Bob. And so we go over there and talk to him, and then I saw Peter up in more in North County. I was playing some gig up there. This is a long time ago, but I went surfing beforehand, and I'm walking out of the water, and there's Peter just walking in the water, and I just pass him, like, hey Peter. We sit down and chat for a minute. But you're right. Yeah, that's
We
funny.
don't surf, but we play tennis.
Okay, nice. Where do you guys go play tennis at?
We live in a condo building with a
Oh, so
tennis.
you have. Oh, okay. You have little courts. Oh, okay, cool.
We live in Hillcrest in a high rise.
Oh, okay, cool. So you. Oh, that's cool. I didn't know you guys play tennis. Yeah, Jesse's been trying to get me to go play tennis.
Well, it's a lifelong endeavor, like music is.
Yeah.
I mean, you have days when you can't hit the ball, and you have days when you think you play tennis.
Oh man, I just immediately grabbed my knees. I just feel like it would just destroy my knees.
Uh,
Whenever I do some jerky moments or movements, that would get me. But that seems fun. What are other things that you guys are into? I mean, again, like I said, we always talk about music, but
Who's the young tenor player we like so much? He's a surfer. Well,
Oh,
he's still a
Nick Caldwell.
Nick
oh
Caldwell.
yeah, Nick does surf a lot.
He's a
And
bad
he
boy.
was our student in camp for 3 years or
Something like
Man, Nick sounds so good.
oh,
If you just shut your eyes, you would have no idea.
and that is not only natural, innate natural ability,
Mhm.
but he listened to the masters and he learned by ear.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's where that tradition comes from. I mean, you know, but yeah, we're preaching to the choir, I guess. But I mean, this is great, guys. I mean, it's nice just to sit down and talk with you. I feel like every time I see you, we're always like working or something.
Well, always or listening to other players or something.
Yeah, yeah.
I have a little bit of an out time, Louis, because I got a student coming at 2:30.
No worries. Okay, cool.
But I didn't want to put an ending on it. I just wanted to let you know that we'll have to be.
Okay, cool. Well, I mean, I'm just grateful that you guys are in San Diego, that I got to meet you and that I get to see you around. And thank you for doing this because now we have it on record. So it's kind of just fun for me. It's like my
Well, I'm
little.
glad we had a chance to play at the Westgate because I hadn't really played a gig with you.
Yeah, that's true, actually.
I heard you, but and we had a lot of fun, and um, then it just got too cold to be out there. So when we go in, of course, I can play with Mike because there's a piano.
Nice. Yeah, great.
Although this week we're not going to do it. It's too small in that little room.
Yeah. Well, it'll be back in.
We're having a little uptick here from the holidays.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
You got to
Well,
be careful.
I'm excited to see you guys when you are back. I mean, I honestly, I really love that room in the Westgate.
Hmm.
Just because it's just so nice to like be able to sit there and hear. I don't know. I just love it, and I like the carpet. I think it sounds nice.
And we'll have a new piano soon.
Oh, are you gonna bring the? Okay.
Handlery piano over.
Okay, cool, great.
Handlery's supposed to be back too in the spring.
Okay, great.
He said second quarter of 2022.
Well, that's gonna be great. Yeah, I mean, that was another great night. So.
Well, it's pretty nice when you get to sub for Frank Potenza. and see Mrs. Christie.
Yeah, that's so funny I mean, I don't know if anyone's gonna watch this, but that's that I know this lady she was my elementary school teacher, and she just came around again because she happened to know all you guys, and I just think it's such a small world. I'm just like,
And she's the biggest jazz fan.
which is so ironic. It's just so weird. I don't know if that's ironic or I don't know.
Yeah, she comes to everything.
And just, yeah, I mean, it was just so interesting to see her again. I was like, because of course for me, I know I was young, but I remembered her. So it's just, yeah, that's so funny.
You still call her Mrs.
I call her Miss Christie. I can't not. Yeah. You know what's funny is that we were sitting there having like a glass of wine together. It's like,
Yeah. And you're feeling like you should not let her see you
yeah,
drink.
yeah. That's so cool though. But yeah, that's great.
The jazz audience in San Diego is very devoted to all of us.
Yeah.
The
And
Handlery was jammed with people every single Sunday,
Mhm.
and they were devoted, and they were, they tipped well. They spent money because they understood what we were trying to do there, and so there's another whole side behind the microphone, on the other side of the microphone, to this jazz community.
Mm-hmm.
And, we should be aware that, can't remember who it was that told me, if you're not playing for your audience and you're not including them in the experience, you might as well play in your garage.
Right.
And
And you're not playing for anyone.
yeah. Yeah. So,
Well, that's an old expression too. If you don't play for yourself,
So,
you're not playing for
right.
anyone. Yeah.
And you got to play for yourself, obviously, but you either play in your garage or you realize that these people are spending the money that allows you to play gigs. And that's another, having been a promoter of jazz all my time in San Diego, all the way back to the Horton Grand years and the San Diego Art Museum. And, I nurtured that audience, because if jazz doesn't make money, it goes away.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to have that relationship with your audience as an artist. And I've watched, booking a couple of festivals that I've booked for the last, 13 years or so. The audience, a lot of the artists, don't want to spend any time with their audience or, interact with them. But it's an important part of getting to do this for your living.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a good point to make.
Just a point, because having been on both sides of the booking and the playing, it's something to, maybe just something to consider, because if you curate your audience, you have a better chance of, learning how to relate to them.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that you have to play, Green Dolphin Street every time you see them, but they grow with you.
Right. Yeah, and to have that relationship is crucial. Yeah.
Gilbert's very good.
Yeah, Gilbert's very good with that too.
Castellanos.
Yeah, that's true. He is very good at it. Yeah, I mean, it's I love it. I think that San Diego is just such a little hidden gem. It's so cool. It's like the word's gonna get out. We got to be careful. I'm gonna have to cut this part out of the podcast.
Yeah, well, it's already out. Living in Hillcrest, every single block has a new condo building on it.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. Well, thank you too, and I hope I get to see you guys soon and hear you soon. So
Stay safe, Louie, and take care, and we'll play another gig soon.
okay, cool. Thank you guys. We'll see you.
Rich, full of life. Kaboom, bap.
A jive symphonic funk of off-tone melodies and open-tone vibrations. It's life. Kaboom, bap.